Morning folks and welcome back. I'm finally getting around to a little project that I've been meaning to do for ages. I'm going to be fitting a sailing rig to my canoe. I bought this rig back in December and I fully intended to fit it well before now. In fact, it would have come in really handy on my recent Medway canoe trip. But I've got a big canoe trip coming up in August, and this rig here is going to make life a lot easier. Give me a bit of assistance from the wind. In this blue bag here, we've got the sail itself, we've got a mast, we've got two spars here. There's a top spar or yard and the boom, which is the bottom spar. I'll talk more about the sail a little bit later on. We've got a thwart here with a hole in it to take the mast, and the mast foot itself, which is bonded into the bottom of the canoe, and that holds the mast vertical and in place. We've got a leeboard, which fits down the side of the canoe and acts like a centerboard that you'd have on a normal sailing boat. This enables you to be able to sail in a nice straight line, and it stops the boat from skidding across the water due to the forces of the wind itself. It also means that you can sail upwind into the wind like you can on a normal sailing boat. We've got a load of fixings and bits of hardware and things here. These two bolts hold the sailing thwart onto the gunwales. We've got a bracket here for the leeboard and the clamp that holds it in place. The leeboard pivots along that so you can lift it up out of the water when you don't need it, when you just want to paddle. I've got some glue here which I'm going to use to glue the mast foot in. I've got a cleat, and I've got some additional bits of wood here which I'm going to use with the bracket to make my own mounting for the leeboard that fits my canoe. There are loads of different sails out there in the market, from very simple sort of pop-up sails, round ones that just give you a bit of extra power from the wind if it's behind you, you know, if you're paddling downwind. There are sails where you use your paddles as the spars, and then there are, you know, much more elaborate rigs like the one that I've got here. I bought mine from Solway Dory, and in my mind they are the best. They're designed by people that know about sailing, so you know, the whole rig, the whole sail it's totally adjustable. There are downhauls and outhaul lines and all sorts, so you can adjust that sail and keep it properly in shape. You know, it creates a curve as it fills with wind, and the cloth can stretch a little bit, so there's various adjustments so you can keep that in trim and keep it in shape as it should be. It is a proper sail, a scaled down version like what you'd find on a sailing boat. Solway Dory sell a whole range of sailing canoe things. In fact, they make boats as well, sailing canoes, various models, but they sell, you know, all sorts. There's the rig that I've got, which is the Expedition 25. It's a Lugsail, but they also sell a 35 square foot sail as well, a Bermudan rig. They sell rudders and tillers and all of the hardware and you know, fixings that you might need if you wanted to make up a component yourself, like I'm going to do with the leeboard bracket. Yeah, just get in touch with Mark at Solway Dory. He can advise you and you know, give you any information that you might need about what will work with your particular canoe. I've got no affiliation with them. I've bought all this, and I am really excited about giving canoe sailing a try. I'm going to start by installing the thwart and the mast foot. So I'm going to need the thwart itself, the foot, these two fixings here, and some epoxy glue. I'm going to use G-Flex for this. This stuff is really strong glue, but it remains a little bit flexible, so it'll allow for any flex in the hull and you know, movement associated with paddling and sailing. I'm also going to need some tools, so I've got a handsaw for cutting the thwart to size. I've got some masking tape for marking out, pencil and tape measure. I've got some sandpaper, and I'll explain a bit more about what that's for in a minute. I've got a bevel gauge, although you could make do with just a straight bit of wood or just a straight edge, and I've got a drill with a 5mm drill bit. I need to make a decision about where to mount this mast thwart. Normally that would just sit behind the front seat on a tandem canoe, but because I paddle my canoe in reverse, it's a tandem canoe, but I paddle it solo, so I sit on the back of the front seat. That's actually the front seat, but I sit here pointing this way. I've got enough room then for my camera and all the rest of it. Then I had to sort of do things a little bit differently. So I'm going to position that thwart roughly 2 foot in front of the carrying yoke, which is where it is there roughly. And the other issue I've got is because I've got these scuppered gunwales here, I need to make sure that I can fit this through the gunnel, so I've got to pick a bit where it's solid and not a bit where there's a hole, if that makes sense. So I think there is going to be about right, and then it's just a matter of making sure that it's central, that hole is central, by carefully measuring and making sure that it is, you know, square, which is not easy on a boat that's curved. Then I'm just going to use some masking tape to mark that position on the gunnels. I'm going to use my bevel here to get that angle right, so that when I cut the thwart, that angle matches the angle of the hull at that point. And I also need to make sure I allow for tumble home, which is basically the bulge of the hull just here. My gunnels are closer together than the hull is at this point. There's a little bit of a bulge, a curve, so I need to allow for that as well. Right, that is all cut and clamped in place. I forgot to mention clamps for things you'll need. You need to clamp that thwart in place while you drill it. So I've just made a mark there. I actually ended up moving the thwart ever so slightly towards the front of the boat there to avoid that screw. That's one of the screws that I use to fix these gunnels on, and obviously I don't want to end up drilling and then hitting that screw, so I've just come slightly along a little bit, and that should be all right. Now that the mast thwart is installed, it's time to focus attention on the foot, which is going to be glued into the bottom of the canoe. And the purpose of that is to hold the mast still in an upright position. I've just created some downward pressure on the foot by using the mast and running a bit of paracord, which I've tied off to the thwart up through the eye at the top of the mast and then back down and just cleat it off. That way I can pull the mast down and it just puts pressure down into the foot. It's really important to make sure that mast is upright, so just square it off the thwart here to make sure it's upright left to right. I'm just going to put a straight edge across from the mast thwart to the carrying yoke, and just make sure that's upright there as well. I'm happy with the position of the foot. The mast is upright, fore and aft and left to right as well, and I've made sure that it's not twisted, you know, it's nicely in line with the canoe. So I'm just going to mark out that position with masking tape. Now, because the bottom of the mast foot is flat and the bottom of my canoe isn't, I need to shape this so that it fits nicely on that little spot there and matches the shape of the canoe. So to do that, I've got a piece of sandpaper here. This is off an old belt sander, and I'm just going to line that up in the spot where it's going to go. I'm going to draw some pencil lines across the mast foot on the underside, and then I'm just going to rub that along the sandpaper until I've removed all of those pencil marks. When the pencil marks are all gone, I know that that is then sanded to the shape of the bottom of the canoe. It's reasonably flat at this point, but there is a slight curve. So as you can see, those pencil marks are slowly being worn away. We're getting there. So I'm using West Systems G-Flex epoxy glue. It's really very strong and flexible, like I said earlier, so this stuff should make a really good mechanical bond between the mast foot and the hull of the canoe. I've abraded the hull where it's going to go as well, so both surfaces are well scratched up and keyed. I'll take this glue. So I'm just going to spread this stuff on. I've just put some pressure down onto the mast foot using the mast and the halyard. Just pulled it down tight to get that gluing pressure. The problem with glue, of course, before it sets, it's a lubricant. So that mast foot just wants to slide around in the bottom of the boat, so you need to keep it still. If you've got a plastic boat, there's a handy little tip to keep that in place using pins, sharpened pins in the bottom, which just go into the inner layer of the plastic and keep it from skidding around. Because my boat is fiberglass, it's too hard, that won't work, so I've just had to use duct tape, a good strong Gorilla tape, and hopefully that will hold it in position while the glue sets. So while that glue is drying, I'm gonna make a start on this bracket here for the leeboard, which will drop down over the side of the canoe. So it's going to be laminated from 2 pieces of ash like this. And the reason for me having this thick bit here is to get over the height of my gunwale here. My gunwale sticks up quite high and I want to clear it with the other piece. So those two will be bonded together. There'll be 2 bolts which go through the bottom part, and they'll be bonded in there. So once it's all glued together, the bolts will be fixed and they'll go through 2 holes in the center carrying yoke, and then a couple of wing nuts rather, will hold them in place. And then the bracket will go on the end of that. I just need to do a little bit of shaping on the end there, and that basically forms the pivot, and then the leeboard just drops down and I can raise it up, or if I hit an underwater obstruction, it just boop, pops it back up again, doesn't damage it. So that's how that's going to work. But what I need to do before I glue anything together is I need to mark out where these bolts are going to go for fixing onto that center yoke. I can drill them now. I'm going to do the same on the other side so that I can swap it over to the other side. I have that option to have it on either the left or the right. So like I said earlier, I'm going to glue these bolts in so they're fixed, 1 in each hole, and then when I laminate this together, they'll be covered. You won't be able to see them, and they'll be just fixed. I'm going to mix up some glue to glue that in there, but I'm going to add some microfibers to the glue that just thickens it, basically makes it into a kind of almost like a filler, but it's also an adhesive, and that will hopefully stop it from running down the hole there and oozing out of the bottom, which is what I don't want. I want to try and eliminate the mess if possible. So I'm going to make it nice and thick for bonding those in, and then I'll use a normal mix for gluing the 2 bits of wood together. Well, the mast foot is glued in, the bracket is all glued up, and I've now got 7 to 10 hours of drying time, so I will come back to you later. Well, I left that for the full 10 hours and then I left it overnight just to be sure. So that's well and truly cured. I've just come in this morning and given it all a sand just to take all the glue squeeze out off and make sure it's all nice and smooth, because now I've got to do a little bit of shaping. The leeboard bracket I bought from Solway Dory has a radius curve on the inside of that angle there. And as you can see, my bit of wood hasn't, it's square. So the first thing I need to do is to shape that, to round that over so that this aluminium bracket fits nice and snugly in there. And to do that, I'm just going to use a router with a round over bit. And now you can see it matches that radius. While I've got the router out, I'm just going to round over some of these other edges just to take that sharp corner off and neaten it all up a bit. That's all shaped. I've just rounded over all the edges so it's all nice and smooth and comfortable, and I'm going to mount the aluminium bracket next. I've got to carefully mark out these holes through onto the wood and drill them out using the pillar drill. These holes have been tapped already, so they'll take a bolt or a machine screw, obviously going through from the underside. I'm going to bolt that straight through the wood and into the aluminium itself. I've got long machine screws which go through the thicker part of the mounting where it's laminated, and I've got some short ones here which go through the thinner part. I'm quite pleased with how that bracket turned out. I can swap it from one side to the other, depending on what works best, and obviously I won't know that until I get out and try it. But yeah, that's good. It's easy to fit, I can take it off. When it's not in use, it just stores in the bottom of the canoe and I can paddle the canoe as normal. Got a bit of masking tape to clean up, and I think that'll be pretty good. Well, I think the time has finally come, the bit I've been waiting for. Let's take a look at this sail. I'm delighted with this sailing rig and I can't wait to try it out. It's going to be superb on this big canoe trip I've got coming up in August, but I'll talk to you a bit more about that in another video. Yeah, really excited. I've got a few things to do still. I've obviously got to varnish that bracket that I made to protect that from the water and think about steering. There's two options with a sailing canoe with regards to steering. You can use your paddle. You know, just basically you are canoe sailing, so you're paddling and sailing at the same time using the wind to assist you, or you can fit a rudder. I've actually ordered a rudder. I've got one on its way. It just hasn't arrived yet, but I'm going to try both. I recently bought some flotation bags as well for the canoe, which you may have seen in the last video. I had a few comments about those sort of like sausage looking things. They're just buoyancy basically. If I do go over, they make self-rescue a lot easier, because as you tip the canoe, you've got to kind of lift it out of the water. If you're in deep water, that's really hard to do because you've got to kick up with your feet. Well, having bags in there lifts the canoe out of the water and gets most of the water out, so you can just flip it the right way up and clamber back in. You won't have quite so much water to bail out. Just makes it a lot easier. So yeah, I will certainly be using those because the chances of capsize are obviously greatly increased when you've got a great big sail at the top leaning you over in the canoe. The leeboard helps, but you know, there is always that risk. So yeah, very excited to try out a bit of canoe sailing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.